a musician. I've been in Afro pop, I'll say Kenyan Afro pop for, I'm going to 25 years now. So it's been a long journey of learning on the job. But I can say, with the right support, I've learned quite a bit. Yeah.
I remember when I joined MCSK in 2007, we had an interaction, and that began your journey of identifying and recognizing a lot of your corporate.
Yes.
The first thing of interest to me was why before 2007? Why it took that time to realize that, hey, I need to register and protect my works.
Yeah.
And that leap moving fast into IP.
I think for me, I'd say I got into music by chance, and I got into music because of the passion of creating music and seeing people enjoy music. My focus was more about performance and stuff like that, and I would earn money from when I go physically and perform, Unfortunately, at that time, things like royalties was not a thing that we were getting. I wasn't really looking at selling music because guys weren't like buying music that much. So my focus was more about performance. So thinking about registering and stuff like that wasn't a focus for me, yeah. But I would once in a while get a deal. Someone wants to buy a song buy a license from me. So I started seeing the power of what I'd created earlier. So by the time you were coming in, I had sold 2 or 3 licenses. So when you started telling me, we want to build the royalty industry, we want to create more structure. And you explained to me that because you're my boy, and I know you had gotten more on terms of legal. It made sense for me. It was clear that it's beginning. This is the beginning of really creating some good structure. But I could understand the bigger vision. The bigger vision of actually who owns this when someone wants to use it, and I had benefited from earning from it.
And I remember we went through an interesting phase where we even had to start breaking down copyright, related rights, defining even within what copyright is, and so on and so forth. And I remember in my previous discussion with you where we talked about first the copyright, because at that point I was with the Music Copyright Society of Kenya, and my interest was to know, for example, with your songs, who the author is, who the composer is, who the arranger is, and who the publisher is, because that basically forms the copyright within the musical work. Just as an example, maybe from one of your songs or an instance where you have a different author. Do you have situations where you have someone who's different as a songwriter?
My earlier works I did mainly myself as a songwriter.
All right. So you own the lyricist and the author, that right, you can use,
and the performer.
And performance.
Because I'd be the one who's singing the song. Once in a while, I would have maybe someone I've written for a chorus. So like Amani just performed the song.
Very important. So he himself is, you yourself are a songwriter, you yourself are a performer, but you yourself also are a songwriter for other artists. So in other words, there are actually songs that you could own, but you've just in the background written the song.
I can write.
And that's write as an author.
Exactly. So that case. So even for some of my songs, I write the whole song, then I get someone else to sing. So them they just have the performance rights, but they don't have the author rights. Depending. But as you go on, you might find someone has contributed a bit and stuff like that. So you adjust it until the song is finished, and then now you're like, okay, what do we feel about it? Producer, I did this amount. So the executive producer kind of like guides that process. And sometimes I'll talk to you and maybe for advice and stuff like that. So you also need someone else to kind of look from the outside. So that was what I did. But now, later on in my career, I wanted other people to write for me as well. I wanted to experiment.
And for you, that when you say executive producer, that means you're the one who puts in the financial investment towards having your master produced.
Exactly.
So in certain instances, then you might actually own the entire copyright and related right to your works. In some instances.
Actually, not really, because as much as I've sometimes run everything in terms of direction, creative direction, putting in like for videos and stuff like that. Most of them, like Ogopa, my first album, they still owned some rights there because they're also co-authors. You get? Yeah, the co-authors. In with Ogopa.
And that's why you talked about the split sheets.
Yes.
Because when there's a co-authorship, you get into an arrangement of how it is that you shall share.
Exactly.
Brilliant. And I think I'm the one who told you that. I advised you on that. You need to pay me extra.
I get to pay extra.
That was before I was your lawyer.
Yeah. So I think because for me to be able to buy out someone would be pretty expensive, and unless I'm very sure about something, I prefer to be just a partner. So if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, we all tunaumia wote.
Awesome. Yeah. But I think that general understanding of the music industry from your perspective, I think is very clear. You do venture into other businesses apart from music writing. Are there any other artistic works apart from, I'll come to your trademark, but are there, you're actually an architect? Drawing and such? So, because again, copyright exists not just in music, but also in artistic works, literary works, and so on and so forth.
True.
Are there any other forms of what, maybe what you've designed here? Is this part of your design?
I mean, this is just interior home design and stuff like that. But what it is like, for example, if as an architect you design a building or a certain, if you find it pretty unique, like you've designed something that you feel, this is something that I would want to protect, because the problem nowadays, people, you design something and someone else just takes and goes and does the same thing.
Yes. And so part of what is protected by the copyright, because now you control the right to reproduce and copy.
Exactly. So what ends up happening is you lose out on an income and someone else takes advantage of your design, your hard design, and probably went deep into your creative process, and you came up with something very unique, and someone takes advantage of it. So of course, for architects, it comes to some designs that you can decide to protect, but many times you don't really focus on that, because it's a bit hard to have a very unique design right now, because it's normally based on either the client preferences, or the environment, or the location, and stuff like that. But for me, I would say my focus is mainly on music. Has been on more music works. Sometimes it's a commercial, but that one they normally buy out. They buy out everything. They just say, just give us the lyrics, the music, or what, and now they take everything, so you don't own it, and it's normally license them for like a month. For like 2 years.
All right. Awesome. Excellent. Just before we step out of the topic on copyright, have you faced any challenges where because copyright exists once copyright does not protect the expression of an idea, but once the idea is reduced into a tangible form. So, for example, even if it's your song, once you actually write it on paper, copyright exists. Have you ever faced a challenge where before you actually are known as the owner of a particular song, you find someone else has either claimed ownership? So maybe you're sitting with someone and discussing, hey, I need to do a song like this and that and that. Boomba. How does it go?
Well, boomba, yes. I'm trying to think of one that was a bit interesting, where I had done Salary, and the song was out. And then no, that was not South Africa. It was a Rwandan. South Africa was Maisha, but that one luckily there was enough proof. I'd released it in a whole album. Everyone knew it was my song. There was proof of when I released it, so it was a bit easy for us to see that these guys had copied the song. But it was a cover. We later realized it was more of a cover. They had just done a small mistake in terms of crediting. They credited the wrong person, so that was a whole issue, because they should have credited me, but they credited some guy in Japan. It's a long story. But here it was, when I released Maisha Salary, I got someone claiming that the track, not the song, the track is his. So when I heard his song, I realized it was the exact same track. But exactly same track.
Coincidentally.
Not coincidentally. Not coincidentally. It wasn't a coincidence. What had happened was a mistake had happened where the producer had sold me the beat, but had also sold him the beat. But he hadn't really sold it to him. He had given him a file, a folder with tracks, and that included Salary, and he didn't realize that. So I recorded them in Rwanda and had them released. On my side, he came, I said, I like this beat, and I made a song. So we found that we are using the same beat. But we cleared it, luckily. The producer talked to him and said, there was a bit of a mistake. I didn't give him your track. I actually gave you guys together without knowing.
Very interesting example. In fact, I'd be very keen to see how the situation now is in Rwanda, because now for Kenya, if, for example, you are two Kenyans in a situation like that, the Kenya Corporate Board has established something called the National Rights Registry, not for purposes of authenticating or confirming that this is copyright, because as I said, copyright exists once it's in a tangible form, but just as an additional evidence, where if you register with the National Rights Registry, you're able to show just that additional evidence. Because you remember what you just said about the South African case, but that was very interesting, because for you, at least, you were able to show proof that you had recorded it before.
Way before.
That was released before. And that becomes a challenge usually when it comes to copyright matters, when you're not able to show that who was the original creator.
True.
Which is why one of the key elements in copyright protection is the original creator. So it becomes a question of proving who.
I mean, you can imagine a situation where you have such an amazing idea, you've recorded it, it's amazing, there's going to be a big hit. We normally go to studios, people visit different studios, someone listens to the song before it's released, likes it, knows that you're planning to release next year with your album in April, goes and records a similar idea and releases it. And then now you look like you're about to copy, because he's released it before you, but yet he had it before it was released. So that's why it's like, it would be actually good when you immediately record. You go and take it, so that even if that guy tried to do that, you come and say, I have proof that I had the song before. And if they listen to it, they can tell this was definitely copied from here. Yeah, man.
I rest my case.
When it was a case, was there a case?
See, I'm the lawyer here. I rest my case. Anyway, thank you. Thank you.
No. It's always good seeing you, bro.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. I've never seen Manze.
My legal thing.
Piga pasi wewe.
It's because I've not won it for 20 years.
Manze. Bro. Piga pasi.
Thanks. Really was happy to see and meet Nameless this morning, one of the guys that I've admired as a musician for quite a long time. You saw his grasp of understanding of the corporate issues, trademark, and so on and so forth. Lovely speaking with him. And now joined, by the way, we're actually on a holiday today, but my good friend here and colleague took some time to join us today. She will now be delving more into the rights that accrue from corporate and trademark issues, and looking at it from a regulatory perspective, just to understand a bit more about corporate rights accruing from them, limitations, and so on and so forth. Is she allowed just to introduce herself?
My name is Sharon Mwata. I'm the Deputy Director in charge of Training and Research at the Kenya Copyright Board, which is a state corporation under the Copyright Act in Kenya. I have been a CEO of a CMO before. I've been a copyright prosecutor. I am a part-time lecturer for IP courses. When you were talking earlier to Nameless and whoever else about copyright, you mentioned that copyright also covers literary works. So literary works are basically books, works in print. Now they also cover computer programs and software. And so the rights that you manage in literary works is what we call reproduction rights. It's the same as musical, but it's managed differently. So basically it's for authors and publishers. Works in print. The author is the person who puts down the text, the material. And the publisher is like the producer, the one who does the design of the book. Maybe we'll call an illustrator to put some drawings in the book, maybe organize a photographer to get some photos for the book, then do the design, do the editing. That's the publisher. And then, but the author is the person who sits down to put the text together.
So what if I'm a book publisher? What is it that I gain from either? Do I have to register it? How do I register it? What are the benefits? Why is it that maybe in Kenya it was low collections? Is it that there was a lack of support? Maybe the challenges that you faced?
I think when you talk about copyright, a lot of people know music, and now a lot of people know film, but a lot of people don't know the literary bit of it. But just like music, I mean, if your music was stolen, if your music was used, you want to be paid. So why not a book? So the publisher puts in the financial muscle to print that book. and to do the hire editors, hire illustrators, hire photographers, hire designers. And so they also need to recoup that. But the author also is an artist like the musician. The musician sits down to pen down a song, the lyrics, put the tune to it, and takes it to the producer. That's the same thing the author does. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe just to break it down. So when I said earlier, and when you had also Nimble speaking about when it comes to corporate and in the musical work, so there are both three aspects that exist when it comes to music copyright. The first one is where I started off my journey in the corporate industry, Music Copyright Society of Kenya. And here we have the authors, basically they are songwriters or the lyricists. We have the composers, the guys, these are the people who make the tune or the beat that you hear in a musical work. So that in the olden days, we have then the arrangers and and then we have the publishers. And the arrangers are the ones that would arrange the lyrics, the musical notations, so that you have a complete musical work complete. And for the music copyright, these basically are the people who are responsible for the raw material within a musical work. Now, Sharon, where you are now, you're actually part of the regulatory body that licenses the Music Copyright Society of Kenya. And part of your mandate, when you license them, your expectation of what it is that they expect it to do, so that it gains, what is it that you license for, and what is it that you expect them to do after you license?
Yeah, I'm sure when you had the conversation about copyright, you must have brought in what really copyright gives you as an artist, which is the right to control certain actions, that the economic right. So it gives you rights to do distribution, communication to the public performance, what else? Display,
reproduction. You said
reproduction. Yeah. So those rights, you cannot sometimes manage them by yourself. So you as an artist would join a CMO, what we call CMO, Collective Management Organization, so they manage the rights for you.
In fact, sorry, just to take you back, and also the right to allow the broadcast or the public performance,
even public performance
of your works. And in fact, that's usually what the CMOs or Collective Management Organizations that you license are supposed to actually...
are supposed to do. So CMOs basically are supposed to... the authors belong to the CMOs as members. So CMOs basically, their work is to monitor the use of the work, go out and license, negotiate licenses, license the users of the work, collect that money and distribute it back.
And just to pause there, and just for clarity, and this in your role as sitting within the regulatory body, this mainly is with the role to license CMOs or to authorize CMOs to license for one, the public performance, which is one of the rights that accrues to the artist, the public performance right, the right of which. And I think that would also include the right of broadcast, captured together. And then I think reproduction will still be retained in some instances with the corporate owners.
So actually the issue is at the contract, whatever the owners sign, what rights are they giving you? But copyright law, the way it stands even internationally, is that since I have those rights, I could give some of them to you as a CMO and retain some, or I could give all. And that's where you come in with licensing and assignment, the difference with that. A lot of CMOs and a lot of rights holders don't know the difference. When you assign rights, you sell, you give them all out. But when I license you rights, I can say I'm licensing you rights for distribution, for reproduction, for broadcast, for public performance. But I've not given you the right for translation and adaptation.
Nice point.
Yeah.
Adaptation.
Yes.
Just clarify. Adaptation. Because
adaptation is like I have a book and somebody wants to turn the book into a movie. So you're making a derivative work out of that book. So that's adaptation. You are making a new work, but then without the old work, I have no new work. I'm basing like The Devil Wears Prada. Have you watched it?
The movie, yeah?
Yeah, it was a book.
Oh.
It is a book. It is a book. Then somebody made a movie.
Okay.
So the movie is a new work.
Okay.
The book is a literary work. What does that mean? I have to ask for the permission to make the movie.
And that's an adaptation.
That's an adaptation. Translation is if you do your song in Luo, if you know Luo, and I want to turn it into Maragoli. That's translation. If you have a book in Kiswahili, I want to turn it into English, that's translation.
Okay. we sometimes get confused between adaptation and a parody and a satire. Have you come across that within?
So a parody is different. Is using a copyright protected work for fun, to make fun, for like comedy. I don't know if you have seen the kind of stuff that Eric Omondi does. Sometimes it's songs. So there's one song I want you to go and check on YouTube. It's called How to Be Rose Muhando. If you see that video, you look at it, what you hear is the real song from Rose Muhando. But what you see is Eric Omondi trying to be her. So that's a parody. He's using it for fun. To make comedy, that's allowed under the law. And so that's why people do parody. But adaptation, you're making a new work from an existing work, whereby if you didn't have the existing work, the new work cannot exist. Adaptation can also be making a sequel of a movie. You have Matilda, Matilda 1, Matilda 2, because without one, you can't make the story of two. So making a sequel of a movie. Now, because copyright also covers apps and computer software, if you update an app, that's also adaptation. It is a new work from an existing work. And that you must seek a license? You must seek a license. You must seek permission or a license for that. Okay, but you say for the parody, we don't need a license for that? For parody, you don't need it. It's under the exceptions and limitations. Oh. What I mean is that there are instances, so the general rule of copyright is, if I want to use, I ask or pay for a license. Yeah? I mean, if you break it down to simple, that's a general rule. But there are always exceptions to the general rule. There are certain instances where the law allows you to use material without asking for permission or without paying for a license. Like, now we have exceptions for the visually impaired people, meaning if I want to take a book and turn it into Braille, I am allowed under the law without asking for permission. Because taking a book and turning it into Braille is actually doing a derivative work from it. The Braille book is a different work, and a derivative being derived, just taking it from exactly, it's derived from and derived from means if you didn't have this original, then you can't derive something from it. That's why you need to seek the permission. Okay. All right. And then satire. Satire would be similar to a parody. Satire would be similar to a parody then. Okay. Yeah. And in that case, you don't really need to get... It's like sarcasm a bit, yeah? Also criticism. Criticism. Have you ever seen on YouTube these guys whose job is just to critique music videos or films? So probably they'll say, oh, there's a new film called Nya Nya Nya, and then they keep putting clips of the film and critiquing it. That's also allowed under the Kenyan law. Okay, so here when I say the law, we're talking about the Kenyan law, because copyright and IP is territorial. So every country has their laws. So the Kenyan law allows you to do criticism. For news reporting, you have seen sometimes when news reporters maybe say there was an accident, and then there's a video, and they say this is amateur video. They probably took it from a witness who was there. And you see the person capturing the video has the copyright, but then the law allows you to use that for news reporting. One of the exceptions and limitations. One of the exceptions and limitations. We'll actually come to that in a short while on the more detail of the exceptions. Okay. All right. One more thing. I might have a concern, for example, if I am a gospel artist. I'm a gospel artist, and I own the copyright to my work. And then someone wishes to use it to make a beer commercial, and I'm not agreeable to that. Does this fall within exceptions? Exceptions. And does it fall within the moral rights which I do not? How does so earlier we talked about the rights of reproduction, broadcast, public performance. Those are economic rights, because when these actions are done, you can derive money out of it. All right. Broadcast? There's broadcast, there's public performance, there is reproduction, there's distribution. Now distribution is by way of sell, rent, hire, lend, import, export, that's distribution. There's display. Display could be, for example, there's a mural in Nairobi and I'm doing a TV commercial or I'm doing a film. Outside where the mural is, and I'm able to show that mural in my TV program or in the movie, that is display, because somebody in America will only have to watch to see the mural. Otherwise, they'll have to come to Nairobi to see the mural. So that means I have displayed it publicly. So that a right like that is also part of what copyright gives you. So those are economic rights, because then when these actions are done, you can derive money out of it. The second right copyright gives you is moral. Moral right gives you, one, the right to own, to be known as the owner of that thing. So if you've written a song, you have a right to be known that Maurice wrote the song.
Yes.
Okay? Two, there is a right to integrity, to object to your work being used in a manner that you don't want. So like that example you gave, if I am a gospel musician, I don't want my music used in a beer advert or in a pornographic movie, for example. I have a right, even if I've sold or given out the economic rights, I retain the moral right. So I have a right to object to that. There's a third one called the right to anonymity or pseudonymity. This one, like for publishers, you can publish anonymously or you can publish using a pseudonym. I don't know if you've watched Out of Africa. Karen Blixen used to write as a man, because when she lived, women were not allowed to publish. So she used to use
artistic freedom.
There was no artistic freedom
at that
then,
point, and that's
because women were not allowed to publish. So she had to use a male name, and people assumed this is a man, until of course that ban was lifted at some point. So her earlier books, she uses her name Isaac Dinson. Then later she uses Karen Blixen. It was a lady publishing as a man. So that's a moral right you're given. Or to publish anonymously. Like let's say the book that Miguna wrote. He could have decided, I don't want to be known.
Okay, and the juicy one. We in Kenya, and I think it applies also in most other countries in Africa. I think in Ghana, we have the private copying levy. I think in South Africa.
We have in Ghana, we have in Malawi.
Tanzania, no.
South Africa, no.
Yeah, this is actually quite juicy.
Yes.
And what private copying basically entails is, because the Kenyan law and some other countries that have the private copying levy, because the law puts in a provision where an individual is allowed to make a private copy of a work for personal use, and because this basically infringes on the right of a copyright owner who controls the right to allow copies of his work to be made, the law then provides for a compensation to be made to the copyright owners, because in the first place the law allowed for that private copy to be made for personal use.
But the idea, Maurice, here is just that whether you like it or not, people will copy stuff for private use. So for private use, you're allowed, but then it will still prejudice the owner, because if we have 50 million in Kenya, if 50 million people or 45 have a phone and they're copying music on the phone, it means these 45 million people could possibly they have Nyima do something. You're not getting something, yeah? So you're preempting that. You're saying because certain devices are going to be used for private copying, then put a levy. You put a levy on that device. Usually it is put at the port of entry into the country or at the port of manufacture within the country. So you put a small percent, it could be 2%, it could be whatever on that thing. So this computer, this laptop, when it comes in, this phone, when it comes in, a photocopying machine, a scanner, all these devices that can be used to copy copyright protected material, even CDs, but now I don't know if we are using CDs, you levy them at that point. So the copyright owner is already compensated at that point, because you're not going to look for 45 million Kenyans to pay. So that levy is now supposed to go back to the rights holders. Yeah.
All right. Quite exhaustive, eh? And ladies and gentlemen, creatives, and that is the case I present to you today on the rights and benefits and limitations for the artistic rights and freedoms.